What's up, college football fans? Sonoy Valente here once again with the Mean Green Show. Today, joined by Eric Henry, and we're going to preview the North Texas FAU game. And before we get into all that, guys, you already know the drill. If you're a fan of college football and G5 football, consider hitting that like and subscribe button because that's truly all that we talk about. Eric, thank you so much for jumping on with me in the midst of a hurricane that you are, it's about to land on your side of town probably tomorrow, like we talked pre-taped, and really appreciate your time. And but where can everybody find it is that what you do for as it goes to covering Conference USA football?
Yeah, man. First off, not in my usual venue when I'm joining you. I'm like seated on the ground here, hence that is a hurricane prep. So apologize in advance. But of course, you can find me on Twitter at Eric C. Henry _. And last but not least, you can find my FIU and Conference USA coverage at UnderdogDynasty.com. That is SB Nation's home for Group of 5 football coverage.
All right, so kind of just jumping right into it, Cyrus, who I believe he used to cover for
Cyrus Smith, former managing editor of the site. Yes.
So he tweeted it out initially, and I don't know. I guess I just wasn't paying that close attention to FAU up until this point, and just years of late, just kind of consider that. Oh yeah, they're probably middle of the pack at least, if not top or tier of the conference. But anyway, he made the tweet though of this is kind of a almost debatable make or break for each of these head coaches, and Coach Luttrell and Coach Willie Taggart. So really, what are your initial thoughts on that statement, as well as just this game, just going into it? What do you, where do you see this thing going?
It's interesting, Sonoya. I mean, I'll start with the Seth Luttrell side of things first. I mean, we all know the conversation around Seth Luttrell, right? A couple of years ago, he seemed to be one of those fast rising coaches, hot names in college football. And of course, the Mean Green, their success is kind of leveled off in large part due to that defense, which we thought, early on. I even wrote in my 3 things in Conference USA column that looked like Phil Bennett kind of turned the tide a little bit with that defense. And now, they're kind of sliding a little bit back into where they were last year. So, that's one side of things I think is really interesting. I don't necessarily know that I consider it as much make or break for Seth Luttrell, because I mean, they are heading into the American. And quite frankly, and I mean, I can defer to you on this as our resident North Texas guy, but I don't think the expectations, and of course, I'm not there on the ground in Denton, but I don't think the expectations have been the same as they were for an FAU program that won 2 conference titles in 3 years under Lane Kiffin. And for better or worse, Willie Taggart has to live up to that standard, has to be compared to that standard. Now, the reason I say for worse is because it's a totally different team than the one that Lane Kiffin had. A, it's been a couple of years, and B, the cupboard wasn't exactly full when Lane left, but now we're in year 3. And I think in specificity, because of the way that they finished the last 2 years, you get the bowl game in the COVID year, you don't have to win 6 games to go to a bowl game. And then in 2021, they lose 4 out of their last 5 and end up not qualifying for a bowl after starting out, 5-2, 5-3, whatever it was. Mm-hmm. That I think is added in a certain level of pressure on FAU. So I do feel it's very much more make or break for Willie Taggart, especially if they're not a bowl team, then conversation, that's it is what it is. But if they're a 6-6 and maybe underachieve, and unfortunately, for FAU fans, you've seen a little bit of that early on when the fact they started out fast against UCF, couldn't sustain another 2.5 quarters, got blown out. Tough loss at Purdue, but I mean, that is a Power 5 opponent, but mainly the loss at Ohio, a disappointing loss. So it'll be interesting, and I think this will be an interesting game for really both coaches and both programs.
Yeah. So what does FAU have to do to secure a win this Saturday at North Texas?
Okay, so something to keep an eye on. I think this is something that North Texas fans will appreciate. One of the top defensive tackles in Conference USA is Big Evan Anderson. He's a guy who probably reminds you a little bit of Dion Noville. I mean, not quite as large. I mean, Dion was 6'5", 6'6", 370 something. But Evan Anderson was at one point in time almost 400 pounds at 6'3". He's down to around 335, 340. He's been banged up the past few games. And the reason I mentioned him first is because we know that North Texas, when things are going well for them, Austin Ani he's been a little bit more than a game manager this year. I think he's top 10 in FBS football in passing yards because of the fact
yes. He does have an extra game though on everybody.
But, fair.
Yeah.
Week 0. That's a good call on your point. But In terms of, he hasn't quite been as game manager as he's been the past few years. However, we know that North Texas bread and butter is they're going to look to run the football. So for FAU, Eddie Williams, a rising middle linebacker, he's going to be accounted. He's make some plays behind the line of scrimmage, at the line of scrimmage. He's got to do that. TJ Young may have to step up and make some plays against the run if Evan Anderson is not there. That's going to be the biggest thing. And of course, on the offensive side of the ball, N'Kosi Perry, everyone knows his story, the former Miami quarterback, former four-star recruit, really talented guy, and he's having a nice start to the year. I just think him starting consistently, that's always been the story about N'Kosi's entire career. And I think this year, in year two in the program, first year in Brent Dearman's offense, he looks to be very comfortable. So it's just going to be a matter of developing that consistency and getting guys the ball.
That's interesting. One thing to think about too is N'Kosi Perry against Purdue anyway was FAU's lead rusher with 93 yards on the ground, and that really UNT has struggled with the dual threat QBs. I mean, UNLV got the better of them. Even Texas Southern, their quarterback was a dual threat guy, and he broke off some runs. And even this last game against Seth Hennigan, who's not really a dual threat, but he was still. And it's weird, they're running through the middle. Like they just pass, and get. I don't know, for whatever reason, a lot of the success is coming with the QBs kind of just taking it up the middle, not a design run, but just obviously just kind of going off script a little bit. So if N'Kosi Perry can do that and put up 60% and 230 yards like he did against Purdue, that's going to be a tough day for the Mean Green, unfortunately. But anyway, what does UNT have to do in order to secure a win, move to 2-0 in conference, and just kind of hopefully keep the things moving from a North Texas perspective?
From the offensive side of the football, I think they got to establish the run. We know the guys they have as far as that three-headed monster in the backfield. Again, with Evan Anderson being out, if you can grind the clock against this team and really run it down. I mean, listen, UCF did a lot of this in the second half when they took off and just left FAU on the dust. That is going to be a big key. And then in terms of on the defensive side of the ball, it's really going to be generating pressure against N'Kosi Perry and not allowing him to get the ball in the hands of those receivers. Guys like Tony Johnson, guys like LeJante Wester, who's leading all of FBS football with 7 touchdown receptions. Of course, they did play a week 0 game as well, so he's got a little bit of a head start on everyone else. But if they can do that, generate that pressure, in my mind, that is going to go a long way to win. Also, FAU has a talented trio in terms of Johnny Ford, Larry McCammon, and Zuberi Mobley in the backfield for them. It's going to be a matter of making sure that they don't get involved in the game as well. If they can do those things, North Texas should pick up a win.
All right. So can we get a point prediction from you for the game this Saturday?
Yeah, let's go ahead and do something to the effect of you want me to give a final score, or you want me to give like an over-under?
Final score. We'll go final score.
All right. Let's go. I think I am leaning let's see, on the podcast, we taped our Conference USA podcast earlier today. I did pick FAU. Let's go some to the effect of 28-24.
Ooh, that's a close game. I think the spread is Absolutely. At 3. FAU.
Yes, the spread is 3. Yes.
Yeah. I think it started at like 1 or 2 or something. So I think it's moved a little bit. Cool. Well, real quick though, before we jump off, Conference USA. I mean, we just saw what Middle Tennessee did to Miami, and I mean, this is kind of a crazy time. I mean, who do you think wins this conference if you had to guess it right now?
That is a great question. I still see this being a UAB UTSA league. At the end of the day, those are the two most talented teams. I do think those things, now that we're getting into full swing of conference play, I do think those things will bear out. But with that being said, as you mentioned, Middle Tennessee, after getting smoked by James Madison 44-7 on opening day, looking like they might be a team that, being the bottom dwellers of Conference USA, they come out and reel off 3 straight, including 2 games, which they were double-digit underdogs. They were 3-score underdogs going into Hard Rock Stadium. It was funny you mentioned the Blue Raiders. We had Rick Stockstill earlier today on the podcast, and Stock, if you've ever had a chance to talk to Coach Stock, he's a people talk about him as if he's an old school guy, and I guess to an extent he is. But he's not someone who's not afraid to talk to you.
Mhm.
and Coach Stock had some nice sound bites. So I'll tease that for the podcast for anyone who wants to go out and listen. You can find that out there probably about Thursday or Friday of this week. But yeah, I think it's a UTSA UAB league, but keep an eye on your Western Kentucky coming off a great victory over FIU. And then, I don't really know if there's anybody else that really, I think, kind of would hover around there. Maybe an FAU if they were to get hot, but I just don't see that right now.
Mhm. Well, all right, Eric, thank you so much for joining in. And for anybody that's not already listening to the Underdog podcast, I'll leave a link in the description for Eric's latest podcast if it's out by the time I put this up. If not, I'll put the second to last one, and you guys can obviously find it through there. But thank you so much once again, Eric. Take care. Best of luck to you and your family, and hope you guys stay well and safe.
Gracias, my friend. Appreciate it as always.